Nottingham Forest versus Man City, the battle for third place in the Premier League. I think at the beginning of the season, nobody had Nottingham Forest challenging for European places. A lot of people thought they were relegation fodder. People had Man City pegged as champions for the fifth time in a row. Hasn't worked out that way, and now we've got a game on the weekend that has huge significance when it comes to the race for the top four. Kim, I'll start with you, Man City fan. Things have turned around a little bit at Man City. I feel like City fans are walking with a pep in their step, pardon the pun. And I feel like going into this game against Nottingham Forest, who have been difficult for the top sides, City going to its favourites, no?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's been a really weird season. No one would have expected this to be a battle for the top four, top three, whatever you want to say. And you are right, like, as a City fan, you know that the last few months have been pretty difficult. Like, I've been negative, and I've been justifiably negative about the prospects of my side. But I do think the last few weeks I've seen a lot of good stuff. And it was only just before the January transfer window opened, and I said to you, the signing, because we were heavily linked with Marmoush, and I said, the signing of Marmoush is a clear indicator for me that Pep is abandoning his obsessive possession-style football, and he's going with a more fast-flowing attack, trying to hit teams on the counter, trying to hit teams on transition. And that's exactly what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, particularly against Spurs. Now, we're obviously in a weird run of form, and there's obviously a little bit of a confidence issue, which is why we didn't go to Spurs and win 5-0 like we most likely should have. Should have been out of sight after the first 12 minutes. But that front four of obviously Erling Haaland and then Jeremy Doku, Marmoush and Savio behind is absolutely electrifying. And it's going under the radar a little bit because the defence is still a little bit shaky. The CDMs, you've got Kovacic, he's a little bit too old. Same with Ilkay Gundogan. And Gonzalez is just... he's new, isn't he? I mean, we all knew that it would take him a bit of time to adjust. And I think that's why City haven't seemed to be as good as a team as they have. But that front four is incredibly exciting. There's a lot of pace there. And when City get Rodri back, I am genuinely feeling very, very confident now, particularly after what I've seen over the last couple of weeks than I have been over the last few months. It does seem like the signs are starting to turn.
Would you agree, Harry, in terms of City finding ways to kind of win games where early in the season they're finding ways to lose games? Do you think that this City team have turned things around due to the signings made in January?
Yeah, I think they've kind of levelled out a little bit. They've got too many good players, they've got too good a manager, and they've got too good a squad to have continued in the sort of way that they were going for a little while. Everybody was so shocked by the drop-off because of the standards that they've set. But, you know, if you give Pep Guardiola the opportunity, you know he's going to turn it back around. And you're seeing the signs of that. The fact that he's obviously committed to staying on a little bit longer. The fact that they went quite big in the January market. It tells you that City are ready to go again. And I think they're going to be strong title contenders again next season. I think, given how good they've been over the last few years, I think we should excuse them for a little bit of a blip. I know as a City fan, it's probably not as easy to say, but they'll be back. They are already on their way back, I would say.
I've really liked the signs I've seen from the new signings as well. I mean, I think there's a little bit of problem sometimes with football media where people like to latch onto something and then they just continue to hound the point because it's a talking point. And that's kind of what's happened with Kusanov. He had a one bad, 3-minute period against Chelsea, and every single comment from every pundit so far has been like, oh, he still looks shaky, It's not really true. In the last couple of games, he's been our best player. He looks absolutely fantastic. He's only 20. Same with Victor Hayes, who's also coming at centre-back. He's 18. And then Marmoush, Savio and Doku, combined age of 23 between them. So it does seem like there's a whole new shift now, not only in playing style, but in age, because you've got the old guard of your Kevin De Bruyne's, your Bernardo Silva's, Gundogan's, who love just keeping the ball. You can include Jack Grealish in that, he's 29 as well. And the whole philosophy was about keeping the ball. Now it seems like the whole philosophy is about getting the ball into the box, which is what we bought Erling Haaland for at the beginning of the season. City fans were really unhappy with me for saying it seems like a little bit of a deal with the devil. And what I meant by that was that City will have to completely change their style of play. And at the time, they didn't have the players to do that. Now they do.
I wanted to talk about because you touched on it there, the formation, the style of play from Man City. The best iteration of City that I saw, the most exciting, was the City team in 2018, City team in 2019, where you had fullbacks that overlapped and also underlapped, and you had Sterling on one wing and you had Sane on the other wing, you had Aguero down the middle, and it was a case of getting to byline, cutting it back and being explosive and being quick and powerful. I know that you haven't got the personnel to play that right now in terms of playing the fullbacks that you've got. I think Vardy is great, but I don't necessarily know if he is a natural left back. Yeah. And you've got Nunes playing on the other side as a right back. But in terms of the system that we've seen from City now under Pep Guardiola, do you believe that, or do you believe that will continue into next season?
Yeah, and I think it's a winning formula as well. I think I think football is cyclical and it changes quite a lot. And I think we've seen from teams like Slot and we've seen from Chelsea this season that obsession over possession, that obsession over control probably isn't working as well as it used to. I mean, I think that's kind of what's harmed Arteta and Arsenal a little bit, is this obsessive need for control. And it's the same with City this season. And if you don't have the players at their absolute maximum, it just doesn't work. Whereas a style of football like this, where you've got three very fast attackers behind the best striker in the world, all you really need is for one of them to have one moment of brilliance and put in a good ball, and you can win a game. Whereas when you're obsessed about control, every single pass in a 26, 27 pass sequence has to be perfect for you to even have a chance or a sniff at goal. So that's why I'm really excited. You've obviously got Doku, who I think is lacking in final product, and I don't know if it ever will come, but he can easily beat a man. You've got Oscar Bob as well, who was fantastic. And I think with Marmoush and Savio, who can also both play on the wings, I think the only thing that's different about this City side now that will be next season is that obviously Roger will be back, which means that we won't need to have two centre defensive mids. We only have Kovacic and Gonzalez against Spurs because Gonzalez is inexperienced. Soon we'll have Rodri, and City will buy a centre attacking mid, whether it's a Wirtz, whether it's my hope is a Musiala, and that type of player will then be feeding in three incredibly quick players with Haaland up front. You add to that sorting out a right-back issue, which needs to be sorted out, and hopefully Diaz and Stones are fit. I think that's an unbeatable formula.
Harry, in terms of Man City this season, there's lots been made in terms of their poor form and has Pep been found out. But say they finish second or third, and they're in the latter stages of the FA Cup, say they win that competition, which I believe they're favourites for. Does that represent a good season for Man City?
I think it represents a very good season. I don't know if it represents a good season for Man City, only because of the high bar that they've set for themselves. But I mean, they're still in a place where they could have a much better season than Arsenal. They could still finish second. They could win a cup. Arsenal could end up third with nothing. So, you know, and we've been talking for such a long time about Arsenal and Liverpool, and we've almost discarded Manchester City this season, but they could still salvage it. That's how good they are and have been for such a long time. So, look, they're going through a little bit of a sort of rebuild. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think in embarking on that rebuild in January, like they did, I think that gives them a few months to figure things out going into the new campaign. And as I said already, they'll be right at the top again come the new season, for sure.
On Forest, we've got to talk about them. Obviously, they're playing at home this weekend. They've wobbled in recent weeks. Against Arsenal, granted, good point, but they showed absolutely nothing going forward. And I think you can attest to that as an Arsenal fan. Against Newcastle, they got turned over in that game, scored a couple of goals to salvage the scoreline, but they got absolutely battered by a Newcastle side that could have scored 7 or 8. Do you think this is the inevitable wobble that was going to always come with Nottingham Forest because they are punched above their weight?
I think it's the doubt that starts to creep in. I think in the first half of the season, when no one expects anything of you, you're basically just running off vibes. Every single game at the City Ground is absolutely horrible because the fans are like, we might not never see this again in the next 5 or 10 years. So let's make it as horrible for the opposition. And then you get into a position where we're actually kind of favourites for a Champions League spot now. And then I think it becomes a little bit more about managing games, managing your players, managing results, rather than just going all out. And I think that's what's hampering them a little bit at the moment.
I think I've used this phrase a lot today, but I feel like it's a levelling out again. This is a team that will punch in well above their weight. They just run out of gas a little bit at the sort of business end of the season. But even if they finish 6th, even if they finish 7th, 8th, which I don't think is going to happen, I think they'll do better than that. But if they did, it would still be a very good season for Nottingham Forest. And I've been really impressed with them. I like the way that they kind of understand what they're good at and understand what maybe they're lacking. And they adapt and mould their game to kind of work for that. They don't need possession. They're not a possession-based team at all. They're quite happy for you to have the ball, and they're confident in their own skin when it comes to kind of just dropping off and defending a little bit. Super efficient in the opposition, in the final third, sorry. You can see that by the number of goals they score. And then you sort of look at the level of possession that they have and chances, etc. So they've been really good in all departments. They're streetwise, they're adaptable. They've got a very good manager. I've been saying for such a long time that Nuno is one of the best managers in the Premier League. I don't think he's Klopp, that kind of level, or Pep Guardiola level, but in that bracket below, he's as good as anybody. His teams are always adaptable. They've always got fight. They're always well organised. He did a great job with Wolves, and this Forest team remind me a lot of that Wolves side.
Before we get to predictions, just a quick one-word answer from both of you. Where did Forest finish this season?
5th.
4th.
Interesting. I think they finished below that. I think they end up finishing 6th or 7th. I do think the bottom's really fallen out of Forest, and having watched them recently, I think they've been struggling for both. Because, like you said, Harry, they're good without the ball.
Yeah.
But when you haven't got the ball and you're not playing well and Chris Wood isn't scoring goals, then what do you provide? And I think we've seen that in recent weeks from them.
But I think you've got to factor in as well that the quality of the Premier League is probably a little bit lower, and the teams around them aren't playing as well as you would expect them to. Newcastle are a bit iffy. They can go and thump Forest and then lose quite easily to Bournemouth at home. You know, that kind of thing. They're a little bit here or there. And I do think that Forest, because they have such a good defence, and they have Chris Wood, who, let's get it right, would not be scoring like this if it wasn't for Nuno. This is a very special season for a player and a manager who have just worked perfectly well together. But if he is scoring, which he usually is, and then you've got Alanga and Hudson-Odoi on the wings with Gibbs-White behind them, they obviously carry a lot of attacking threat. And I think because the defence is so good and the attack is so good, I do just think that they might just edge it into the Champions League. I do feel quite confident for them.
Fair enough. Predictions, Kim. Forest versus your beloved City, what do you reckon score will be?
I think the reason that City have lost so many games this year has been this midfield battle. And I think when teams have three very quick, very fast transitioning midfielders, they've absolutely swamped City. Forest don't have that. And for that reason, I do feel quite confident, especially with how Doku, Marmoush and Savio have been playing recently. So I think 2-1 City.
Harry?
Forest 1, Manchester City 3.
I'm going for 3-1 as well. I think this is the beginning of City's turnaround. Like I said, I think the bottom has fallen off of Forest.